extend my thanks to Stefan Frank, who made sure that the equipment worked this morning. He arrived back in Belmont at 10 o'clock last night after a trip to Europe. And so I'm especially grateful to him. I'm sure he's exhausted, and thank you, Stefan, for making sure that worked. Family has requested that I speak about Betty, relating some anecdotes from her life and adding some of my own reflections, and I'm honored to do so. This is a little bit of biography with other things thrown in. Now, Betty lived to be nearly 96 years old, and so in the few remarks I have, I will not encompass everything about her life, clearly, but we will at least touch upon some major moments. She was a member of this congregation since 1950, that is 64 years, and so was perhaps the longest living member of the congregation. I spoke with her a number of times, usually when she attended Wednesday morning meetings of the Women's Alliance, now just the Alliance, here at First Church. I always found her to be bright and sparkling. One of the things she loved here was the music. And she delighted in having Alpha's music during services. Now, Alpha, Betty was here 64 years. Alpha's only been here 54 of those years. Providing the music for us this morning. So I think that's wonderful. I was present at a dinner we had in the parish hall some years ago, 2011, when Betty was a guest of honor as she was inducted into the Unitarian Universalist Clara Barton Sisterhood for her contributions both to this congregation and to the wider community. Bill has already mentioned some of the things about changes in American life since Betty was born, and we can forget how much history can be encapsulated in one life. She was born in Michigan in 1918 during the last few weeks of World War I. Her father was in the infantry in France at the time of her birth. Betty was born before women were allowed to vote in federal elections. It's not that long ago. She lived through the Roaring 20s and the Great Depression, and was 23 when the United States entered World War II, and was 23 when she married Robert, who was to be her husband for 39 years, and who left to serve in the war after 6 months of training. So she was part of what has been fondly called the greatest generation, and was a woman in the greatest generation. I have a quote from Tom Brokaw's book. The enduring contributions of this generation transcend gender. The world we know today was shaped not just on the front lines of combat, from the Great Depression forward through the war and into the years of rebuilding and unparalleled progress on almost every front. Women were essential to and leaders in the greatest national mobilization of resources and spirit the country had ever known. And Betty was part of that leadership. She grew up in Winnetka, Illinois, the daughter of Maud and William H. King Jr. She was the eldest of 4 children. In a capsule biography she wrote about herself when she was 51, no ego there, I'm sure. She remembered what she described as a pleasant childhood in a community dedicated to progressive schools and to lavish public recreation and parks. She loved swimming in Lake Michigan, a few blocks from her house, where she won races in a community program as a teenager, and the family often spent a month in the summer in the wilds of northern Michigan. The Depression shaped her as it shaped many. And for Betty, it shaped her sense of economy and careful monitoring of the family expenses. But that very economy allowed her to ensure that her children did have all of the lessons and music lessons and art lessons and experiences, including trips to Europe, that she had hoped for them. A quote from a family member, Although she prided herself on economy, she drew the line at huge containers of household products, so the family always had elegantly small tubes of toothpaste. The Depression also shaped her understanding of human need. She saw the devastating effects of an economy that did not provide jobs or hope, that caused people to lose their homes or fear losing their homes, and caused vast numbers of people to become beggars. And that taught her a sense of obligation, the obligation that we all should feel to meet human needs with kindness, support, and generosity. It's a story about her growing up. The Depression, when she came of age, made a deep impression on her. One story she told later was about her father warning her mother not to risk opening the back door to hobos passing through. But when her dad was out of the house, the mother rebelled against his stricture at the sight of homeless, destitute men seeking something to eat. Out the back door went all the scraps from the family meals to these men. From the Depression on, charity was always important to her, particularly to the poor. Into her last years, she carefully went through charitable appeals and gave to as many as she could. World War II also affected her personally, as it did all of her generation. She married a dashing fighter pilot in January of 1942, one she had met at Radcliffe while he was a top student at the Harvard Law School. After a quick and simple wedding ceremony in New Hampshire, to which she wore a suit, she traveled with Bob to bases for 6 months in 1942 while he trained as an officer in the Army Air Corps to fly a P-40, and then she waited out the war at home, writing him frequent letters. He later liked to joke that one of the main reasons he proposed to her right after Pearl Harbor was that he knew she wrote great letters in exquisite script, and she didn't disappoint him, although his return letters were often nearly entirely blacked out by censors, because no one, particularly the enemy, was supposed to know where he was. She guessed right away from a few random clues. He had been flying supplies from India into China. On VJ Day in 1945, she passed through Times Square on a visit and happened upon a confetti deluge. She later wrote, "It seemed to all of us that nothing could ever go wrong again." When Bob came back from India after 2 years, he worked at the Pentagon, and her oldest daughter was born in 1945, while Bob was en route to Japan with the U.S. Strategic Bomb Survey. In the late 1960s and 70s, she was proud to have her only son serve with the Army in Vietnam, and she struggled to understand the lack of unity over that particular war. She believed in education, and she attended Radcliffe, graduated from Northwestern University, and later received her master's degree from Columbia University. Now, it was not unheard of at that time for a woman to have that kind of educational achievement, but it was not that common. She had quite a varied life, working in a munitions plant during World War II, so she was a real Rosie the Riveter, working as a librarian, as a homemaker, and for decades as a volunteer at Mount Auburn Hospital. And she lived in a variety of places: Winnetka, Illinois, New York City, Tokyo, where Bob was a Fulbright scholar, Cambridge, Arlington, Billerica, Massachusetts, and for 35 years here in Belmont. While in Belmont, she was a town meeting member, part of the Thursday Club, which was a literary group, and she had a lifelong love of poetry and plays. They raised their 4 children, Robert, Bill, Jean, and Karen, and Betty devoted much of her life to this task, believing that this was more important than her career. She was committed to education for her children, including music, dance, and art, and she was committed to gifts and works of charity. Betty was devoted to her entire family and loved having her grandsons over for pool parties at her house in Arlington. And she loved gardens too. And she saw planting of a hillside of lush flowering shrubs behind her Arlington home, where she lived for over 25 years. The yard and house were well stocked with her large collection of frog figurines. While in Japan, she soaked up as much of Japanese culture as she could, learning about Japanese flower arranging, tea ceremonies, samurais, and sumo wrestling. Was she just a spectator, or did she? And also communicating with excitement all of these experiences to her children. She was devoted to books and to education for her children, but also to the personal connection that reading to children brings. There's something special about education when it is passing on something you love to someone, child, student, whoever. There's an extra special excitement for the learner in having that personal relationship, and she loved being part of that. It was something she loved to do, and she inscribed in a volume of poems for children that she sent as a 5th birthday present to a grandchild the following words: "I wish I could be with you to read to you," to have that moment of connection. She loved plays and attended musicals while living in New York. While I'm sure this had nothing to do with her own life, she loved songs like "I'm Just a Gal Who Can't Say No," and "I'm Gonna Wash That Man Right Out of My Hair." She read the book The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan when it came out in 1963 and found that it did not speak to or for her. I suspect, this is personal supposition, that might be because she lived a life so full of her own independence and her own accomplishment and her own personal choice that she was beyond what the book was speaking about. She loved her husband and lost him far too soon, spending the last 33 years without him. But she understood the desire for some appropriate distance between spouses. And so she fully believed in the saying, "For better or for worse, but not for lunch." She faced old age without a lot of fuss, except that caused by firmly refusing help as long as she possibly could, good for you, and then for a few more years. She loved her independence. When she moved into assisted living at the age of 90, only after a bad fall, she was asked her goal by the director, and she responded, "To keep my marbles." She kept reading the Globe every day, watched the Red Sox, joined the play reading group, loved her lunches out with her best friend, Elliot Overbeck, who was always there for her, and prided herself on being sure she knew the date each day and what happened in the news each day. Only in her last few months did her marbles get a little disorganized, but they never got lost. Now, the following line, "I'm just the messenger." This is from the family. She also mellowed, which could be disorienting to those who knew her for a long time. So there are lessons to learn from every life. If we look at the life someone lived, what are the lessons that their life teaches which we can choose to accept for ourselves or not? Betty's life, some lessons. Value education for yourself and for others. Value being present to and for and with others, reading to them, spending time with them, engaging with them. While focusing on your family, do not isolate yourself. Do what you can to make the entire world a better place. Economize, but economize in order to be generous. Generous to family and to those in need. Enjoy nature, its beauty, bushes, flowers, and enjoy the human creativity that can improve upon nature and nature's beauty. Enjoy life. Learn about the people and the cultures around you and share your excitement in that learning. Be whimsical. If frogs are your thing, let there be frogs and let them be everywhere. Insist on butter with your bread. And live life to the fullest. Engage throughout life, just as long as you can. And if for you life means that extra slather of butter, and it means sharing a laugh or a story, and it means reading a book to someone, then get out and do it today, do it now, because this is the chance you have. Live it fully. Let us sing together. Hymn number 20. May Betty's spirit be a living presence in our hearts and minds and spirits. May we carry this with us as we go out into the world, filled with joy for her life, joy for the love she brought, the creativity she brought, the wisdom and truth she brought and imparted to all. So let it be. Amen.